Hey, kia ora koutou. Oh, hey, there he is. Hi, John. I was like, where's George gone? George was playing puppet. Feels like I'm not really here. Here I am. Hey, team. Hey, look, we're all here. If we were in a radio station or on Spotify, like some big podcasts, we'd play Thin Lizzy, the boys are back in town, wouldn't we? That'd be what you play right now.
Yeah.
Hi, Chewy.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I was just checking the news before I jumped on, and I figured we might have some stuff to talk about.
I haven't really kept up with the news today. What's been going on?
Oh, it's some minor political thing, just over in the States. Barely noticeable.
Obviously, a big topic of conversation tonight is the midterms, but we are going to talk about other things as well. We're probably going to start the show talking about some local, some national stuff, actually, national and things that Christopher Luxon did today. But that'll be the start of the show, and then we'll go into midterm stuff because there's a lot to talk about. I mean, we said last night, George, that it wasn't according to the polling, it wasn't looking that crash hot for the Dems. But I've got, in fact, I'll show you. There's a guy called Steve Dace, who's like a conservative commentator. He works with what's his name? The guy on the Blaze TV guy, used to be on Fox News, with the white hair and the chalkboard. That guy, I can't think of his name. Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck. He works with them, and this is much the feeling from him. So he's a massive Republican right winger. One of the most disappointing nights of my career, maybe the most. We did get some clarity, but most of it was tragically bad. I'll have more on the show tomorrow. Pray up, whatever the fuck that means. Pray up, like it's going to change something overnight. Pray for an insurrection. That's probably what it means. And look, this is not over yet. I don't think anyone should be celebrating a win for the Dems or anything. However, compared to, I even saw Michael Moore on some of the major news networks during the week talking about red wave. And just remember, I know it's confusing, but they're the opposite of us. So red wave means a win to the right. So a Republican wave, and it's certainly not that. It is a knife edge. And at the moment, it's probably looking like there's a better than even chance that the Dems may hold the Senate. And if they hold the Senate, well, let's get into that conversation shortly. But yes, Chewy, I've had my various internet feeds on all day. Been watching YouTube commentaries as I've been listening and doing stuff in my headphones. And for the very first time in a very long time, my cell phone is dead. Normally it's never dead before I go to bed, and I put it on, but it died at about 9 o'clock, so it's upstairs charging because I was that engaged with listening to commentary all through the day. So yeah, so we will get into that. Is there anything else you guys want to cover off or speak to anything before we get going, or should we just rip into it? Because we're going to start with some Mr. Lux and stuff, and then we're going to get into the midterms.
Let's see what old Luxo's up to.
All right. Well, let's have a look. Christopher Luxon this morning. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know we normally put up comments about hello because we like, evening all hello. Yep, good evening. Yep, kia ora all good evening. Look at this going through fast. Sorry, George, but you remind me of Radar from MASH tonight. Jay in Power says not the red wave, but the red whimper. So glad Federman bet Oz. You guys are going for it already. So we'll get to more of your comments as we go through. And I'll highlight a couple of my favorite bits. So hello, good evening, everybody. We're going to get into things tonight because that conversation around the midterms might go for a bit. So let's have a look at something that happened this morning on the AM show. It was interesting. The leader of the opposition was interviewed about the $20 million that New Zealand has just committed to COP27 to help developing countries offset the negative effects from carbon emissions and from climate change. And Ryan Bridge kind of set up the start of the show. It sounded to me like he was going, "Oh, what do you think of this, Mr. Luxon?" And Mr. Luxon kind of went, "Yeah, it's always good to support the countries who need support." And he talked about climate issues and that. And it was almost a bit like Ryan Bridge was expecting a different response of like, "What a waste of money, $20 million. Well, that's right." But actually, to his credit, Mr. Luxon basically was like, we've got to do something about climate change, and this is something. That was sort of the response. The second part of the interview got into a conversation that we were having last night, George, where he spoke to Mr. Luxon, and Chewy, you weren't here for this, so you can jump onto this. He spoke to Mr. Luxon about the Reed Research poll from yesterday that you did the word cloud, and he asked he asked him about his word cloud. So let's pick it up from there, and then we'll have a chat about a second part of the conversation as well, because apparently Mr. Luxon is not very pro-business.
Right, News Hub Read Research, they did a word association thing with voters and asked them what they thought of you. I'm going to show our viewers a little glimpse at the moment of some of the words that people use to describe you. Don't know, unknown, average, inexperienced, unsure, smarmy.
Now, the first thing I want to point out as we're doing this is just note that what Ryan Bridge is doing is the correct thing, because what these word clouds are is they take all these words, and the more times it's referenced, the bigger the word. So he's saying don't know, which is the biggest, unknown, which is the second biggest, inexperienced, which is big, smarmy, which is big, average. So he's using and pulling out all the words from the word cloud that most people, i.e. I could extrapolate most New Zealanders think about when they think about Christopher Luxon. Yeah. So that's a pretty fair response from Ryan Bridge, pointing out, like, if this was a pie chart, he's pointing out the biggest chunks of the pie when he's talking to Mr. Luxon about Mr. Luxon's words. Okay, we'll keep going.
Arrogant was another one. Do you relate to any of those, Chris?
No, I don't actually. But I mean, what I'd say is, look, I mean, the way I've come through politics has been really fast to become the leader of the National Party. And, that's a big, thing that people need to get to know me. They're going to do that over the course of the year. It's going to be a big, long job interview, and they'll get a sense of what I'm about. What I'd say is that I come with real world, leadership experience. I come not as a career politician. I will be different. And I think that's a really good thing and what's needed in New Zealand right now.
What do you make?
So good to hear that he's talking about his real world experience. So he's putting out his business credentials, which is what he's running on, which is fine. So he's saying, I'm a businessman, I've run businesses, I'm good with running businesses. Yeah Okay. So let's listen to this next part. Ryan Bridge goes into the conversation talking about the words used for Jacinda Ardern.
Think of some of the words that the public used to describe your opponent and the Prime Minister. Some of the worst ones were evil, liar, useless, deceitful, dictator.
Okay. So they're the words for the Prime Minister. And as we've just seen evidence by Mr. Luxon's word cloud, he used all the biggest parts of the pie. So you would expect, fair be fair, what are all the biggest words of the pie for Jacinda Ardern? Notice they didn't put up Jacinda Ardern's word cloud. I don't know if you noticed that, but they didn't put it up. So we'll put it up. Here's her word cloud. And they did say the word useless, and that's one of the larger words. Funny they didn't use the word caring, good, kind, capable, great, or empathetic. But they did say evil, liar, deceitful, dictator. Can you see those, Chewy? Can you see those words?
I can't. Do I need glasses or an
Shall I help?
or something?
Shall I help?
Oh,
I'll help.
Really?
There they are.
Oh, Jesus.
There's those words. So, the big chunk of the pie that thinks those words, it's just, I'm watching this interview and thinking, oh yeah, because I did a piece the other night basically saying that Ryan Bridge can't hide his disdain for the Prime Minister or Labour anymore. So
I saw that interview the other day. It was disgraceful.
Ryan Bridge chose to highlight, they didn't show the word cloud for the Prime Minister, but he chose to highlight the words dictator, which I can't even read and I'm here, liar, deceitful, evil, and useless. Didn't mention the big words. Mentioned the big words for Mr. Luxon. Didn't mention the big words for the Prime Minister. But that's what he did, and that's what he went with. So he asked Mr. Luxon about the words that he's just mentioned: evil, liar, deceitful, dictator, and useless. And to be honest, to his credit, Mr. Luxon had a fairly bland response. He didn't really attack the words, but he did use it as a point to put out his talking points.
Well, look, I think Jacinda Ardern, has good intentions. I think the key issue that we've found with her and her government is, it is comprised of all career politicians. They haven't necessarily run things or know how to get things done. And I think that's the real challenge that they're running into now. Essentially, New Zealanders are looking at it and saying, look, there's a lot of spin, but there's no delivery. The economy's going backwards. Our healthcare system's falling apart. Our kids aren't going to school. We've got major challenges with housing crisis. We've got rising levels of crime. Those are the outcomes that New Zealanders want to see governments improve for them. So that's how they get ahead.
There you go, Chewy. So you've seen the word cloud conversation with us. And I just want to point out one more thing before you jump in, or either of you jump in with comments on the first part of this Mr. Luxon conversation, is one of the things that Christopher Luxon is doing is running on his business record, right? He said there the problem with Labour is, quote, they haven't run things, i.e. they haven't run businesses. They're not business people. The reason I'm highlighting that is we're about to get to a part of this conversation where all of a sudden, maybe because it doesn't fit the popular narrative, Mr. Luxon's going to become very unbusiness, but we'll get to that in a minute. Chewy, what do you think of the word cloud and the response that you've got from there?
I both love and hate those word clouds because it's generally very funny, and then the other part of it is it's borderline bullying, especially for someone like Luxon. Yeah, I mean, he's going, I've come into politics fast, and that's why don't know is so big. It's because he's just not on people's radar. Like, he can't come in and say that he's come up through the business world because he's just been a middle management. He hasn't run anything. Even his tenure, the closest thing he had for running something was Air New Zealand, and that apparently was not a good time for the company. All he had to do was stop it failing, and that was just by the skin of his teeth. So, yeah, I don't know. If you're going to be business daddy, be a good business daddy.
Yeah. Anything about that for today, George? It's kind of flying on from our conversation last night, but I did start to feel again. Yep, here we go. This is your AM show conversation where basically they enable and help the right win talking points because we're going to give Ryan Bridge, and as we say, because we can walk and chew gum, we're going to give him some credit very shortly. But that's how the start of the conversation certainly felt.
I'm surprised you didn't bring up the white thing. I felt like that. In a
Did you see that, Joey? One of the words was white for
which I feel like is basically a cross between unknown / don't know and more of the same, right? Is basically what's encapsulated in that word white.
There's bald.
Oh, actually, no, someone pointed this out to me.
Like
there's another bald.
There's two. Oh, yeah, there is up here. There's two of them. There's a bald there as well. He's bald. He's double bald. Where does it say? The problem is trying to find things like, there's white. You see, white's pretty big. That means actually quite a few people responded by saying white. And it's like, why? I mean, like, why would acknowledging one's Caucasianness be of importance unless for that person it was of importance?
Yeah. I guess that's what I was trying to explain. Is to people, it signifies a more of the same, and a / don't know, right? It's just like, he's a white dude.
Yeah.
Same as businessman, I guess. It's a signifier of someone in power.
Well, what a great segue, George. Speaking of businessman, to his credit, 100% credit where credit's due. Ryan Bridge started a really interesting line of conversation with Mr. Luxon after that, talking about bank profits. Because I don't know about people out there, if you run a business, the idea of running a business primarily is to turn a profit. There can be altruistic businesses that also provide, good for community and good for society. And that's always, in my opinion, the best kinds. But at its absolute core, the idea of a business is it needs to make a profit to continue on as a business. So profit making is quite an important component of business ownership and running a business. So again, to his credit, Ryan Bridge asked Mr. Luxon about the bank profits, especially when Mr. Luxon has come out this week, basically agreeing with the Prime Minister that these bank profits are too much. But hang on, you'll say, National is the party of business. They are the party of successful businesses. Surely huge amounts of profits would basically identify a successful business. How do those two things marry up? Let us have a look.
You have basically this week agreed with the Prime Minister. I've looked at your wording and the wording of your deputy. You basically agree that they're making unjustifiable profits in a cost of living crisis, right?
Well, what we're saying is, look, at a time where there is a massive cost of living crisis, where Kiwis are doing it incredibly tough with rising inflation, rising interest rates, and at the same time you've got large bank profits. That's a really tough thing to see.
But what's large bank profits, and why are you the arbiter of large bank profits?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, what we've been requesting the government to do is, it's all very well to talk about large bank profits, but they need to do something about that. And the thing that they need to do is actually get to the cause of the problem, which is what we've been calling for, an independent inquiry on the actions of the Reserve Bank and the government around its spending, around the printing of money, around the borrowing of money through
but
COVID,
are their profits
and
not
to understand whether that contributed to bank profits,
fine, we can talk
as well
about,
as contributed to worsening the cost of living crisis.
We can talk about.
But just remember as well on this point, it's been pointed out very clearly that tax cuts that National are proposing are going to contribute to inflation, at least the same as current spending by the government, if not more. So we always got to remember that.
What contributes to it, but aren't large bank profits a byproduct of the fact that they are large banks?
Well, they are. They're large businesses. They've got large asset bases. They need to have good levels of profitability. It's important. Why? Because as we look out for the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to go through some very, very tough economic times.
So are you
we need our banks to be profitable and strong.
Right. So are you uncomfortable with the profits, or are you not uncomfortable with the profits?
I am uncomfortable. What I'm wanting to understand is, I want a proper understanding of whether the New Zealand government's actions actually enlarge those profits.
What gives you
more
cause?
than they would have been, and because of government printing.
Okay, but why are you concerned about the profits? What exactly about the profits? Is it because it's more than $1 billion? Is it because it's 13% as a return on equity, which, by the way, is middle of the road for NZX listed companies? What exactly are you uncomfortable about?
Well, what I'm really uncomfortable about is the actions of.
Is this interview? I didn't think I'd be asked these questions. Maybe it might be the answer there.
You're my puppy. You're not supposed to bite me.
Yeah, like we've always said this. We are ardently and honestly about where we approach from. But if something else requires or deserves praise, we will give it praise. And this is a really good line of questioning.
Spending $1 billion more
sorry.
each and every week.
No, you said you were uncomfortable with the banking profits. Chris, you said you're uncomfortable with the banking profits, and that's what I'm asking you about.
Yeah, so what?
Can I ask a little byproduct there? He called him Chris.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Like
he often good mate. Does. He always does.
But he never calls the Prime Minister Jacinda, does he? Does that demonstrate an over-familiarity? Look, I'm not criticising him on his line of question here, but I think it's interesting he called him Chris. I don't think I've ever heard him call her Jacinda, and I don't think it would be appropriate other than Prime Minister.
Well,
I've also seen Luxon push back on being called Chris, like in interviews and that sort of thing. That he prefers to be called all the time. Christopher.
I'm also thinking leader or Mr. Luxon. Chris is very familiar. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. I mean, we'd call him Chris because that's our style. But I just had the thought, leader of the opposition. It's like Chris, like a mate would talk. Whereas the Prime Minister, it's Prime Minister, Prime Minister.
It's just like, he can't.
All right, let's play the end of this. Only a few seconds to go because this is coming up to the salient point that Ryan Bridge makes very well.
What I'm saying to you is, I want to understand how those bank profits are derived and actually whether they benefited from government action around government spending, but also Reserve Bank printing of money. We've been calling for an independent inquiry because we want to understand that for two reasons. One is about the reappointment of a Reserve Bank governor to understand the performance of the Reserve Bank, but also to understand whether the government's actions actually contributed to rising levels of cost of living, inflation, interest rates, and bank profits.
Are you uncomfortable with the nearly $500 million profit you turned as Chief of Air New Zealand?
No, I'm very proud of the record of Air New Zealand around commercial success, cultural success, and customer success.
What's the difference?
It's about just making sure that we understand whether the government's actions actually contributed to worsening the cost of living and inflating government bank profits.
And that's it. I mean, if I was going to critique it, I'd say this is the next point of this conversation. He just goes,
all right. Chris Luxon, thank you very much for your time this morning.
So we got to the best part of the conversation, a really, really, really good pushback, and only got one kind of pushback, but it was a pushback, and I think it was a really, and this is the point, for me, and I've said this many times, and I would say this to Dunedin mayoralty candidates when they come in touting their business acumen. I'm like, Dunedin City Council is not a fucking business. You can't run it like a business. The government is not a business. Yeah, look, I'm not criticizing you for being a good businessman or a businessman. I'm not saying Mr. Luxon, but in general. But it's not necessarily the be all and end all for becoming the leader of the country, because you cannot run a country like a business. Because if you ran a country like a business, for example, all the libraries would be shut down because they're not profitable. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not a business. It's basically more like, have you ever run a not-for-profit? That would probably be a better, like transferable sort of skill set than a for-profit business. But anyway, George, you were about to say something.
No, Luxon basically at the end, because of the pushing that's happening, he has to basically try and turn it around, say basically the problem isn't the bank profits. The problem is we have to make sure if the government did something to make that happen, right? And from a traditional national view or a pro-business view or whatever, then the government doing something to make that happen would be a good thing, as you're sort of getting at, Pat. But he sort of, I guess, is able to worm his way out of that and make it become about, if the government has contributed to this.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think the whole banks thing recently, I mean, it's sort of the classic lie of neoliberalism that somehow all these businesses that purely there to turn profit and reproduce will somehow take up social responsibility because norms, etc. And that's sort of the great lie that's not really always interrogated in these conversations. But the point I wanted to make there is it is interesting how the banks have been in the headlines for the week. It sort of is able to move attention away from cost of living as a Jacinda Ardern problem and cost of living as correctly as a more structural problem.
Well, it's like everything in our lives that contributes to cost of living at the moment. We talk about the supermarkets, we talk about the fuel companies, now we talk about the banks with everybody's money and everybody's mortgages and that sort of thing. And everybody's going, New Zealanders are doing it tough. But they aren't. They're all posting record profits. And especially from the banks to go from 1 week going, well, we've got to take some heat out of this economy. We probably need 150,000 people to lose their jobs and absolutely get, toughed out on the area. And then we'll be sweet. And then the very next week, profit after profit after profit. And it's like, oh, you bastards. That was my reaction to every one of those stories. You absolute bastards. Because when they're talking about these people losing their jobs to cool off the economy, they're real people.
Yeah.
They've got bills to pay,
yeah.
kids to feed. It's just that disconnect at the moment is just, I can't get there.
The thing that Ryan Bridge did well then, is that it's fairly obvious that he's basically calling Christopher Luxon on making a populous stand and not a stand he believes in. It's the classic politician thing where you say something because it scores well with society. Because that whole point, hang on, how come you at Air New Zealand were allowed to make $500 million profit, but the bank's making $1 billion profit is wrong? Why? Where that seems incongruent to me. And so the reason that Christopher Luxon is saying this is not good is because Labor's saying this is not good, and because the people are agreeing that it's not good. So he has to say it's not good. And then thankfully someone, hand on heart and apologies to him, but I'm surprised it was Ryan Bridge, someone has to actually go, hang on, this doesn't make sense, because you are a businessman, you are for profit, you would be the more profit, the better the business. How can you be against this? So, credit where credit's due, walk and chew gum. Well done, Ryan Bridge.
It didn't sound right to me. Just hearing you say it.
Not a very high bar, right?
Well, no, it's not. And, Bradley says bombs away for that. And then he said, let him off the hook. Maybe a little bit so here. Roe asks, who does Ryan want to be the leader of the National Party, or is he up for David Seymour? I don't think there's any conspiracy theories in there. I just think that it feels fairly obvious to me that there is a right-wing echo chamber on the AM show. And like I've said the whole time, that's fine. It doesn't matter that there is. What matters is when it tries to get hidden as we're independent, we're neutral. That's what the problem is. But in this instance, he called it like he saw it, and good on him. Well done. Well done. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that we said well done. I'm sure he will be. Okay, so let's get to the midterms, shall we? Because this is fascinating. I don't know who's been looking at it through the day. Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. Here is the map as we're looking at it right now. Now, I've just basically clicked on key races. So here is the key races. And the reason they're key races is because a bunch of these things, the incumbents are winning, and it's not a problem like Florida, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the key races are the places that need to be won or need to be flipped at the start, because the Senate is 50-50. When it's 50-50, the vice president, I nearly said deputy president, the vice president has the casting vote. So what it means is 50-50 in the Senate right now, therefore it's Democrat controlled because the vice president is Democrat. So that therefore means the Republicans at the start of the day needed to only flip one seat, because then it's 51-49. And that means they've got control of the Senate. 538 has been projecting for a very long time that they would get control of Congress fairly easily. And for quite a while, we looked at it last night, George, there was like a 70% chance that they were saying that the Democrats would hold control of the Senate. And that slowly dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And I think when we looked at it yesterday, George, it was about a 60-40 chance that the Republicans would control the Senate, according to 538. Lots of people, including I saw a documentary maker, Michael Moore, coming out through various news channels saying there's going to be a red wave. There's going to be a Republican wave. In other words, they're going to smash them. They're going to get smashed. And it has not happened. The only result that we've got so far about flipping result is actually a result that has gone flipped to the Democrats, and that is Pennsylvania. And that is the man who had the stroke,
that's a big one.
Mr. Fetterman, and the man who anyone knows his name thanks to Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Oz. And that's been called, and Fetterman has won it. And before these guys ran off, we're in the runoff. We wouldn't be doing much run if he's just had a stroke, but you know what I mean? It was a Republican seat. So that is now a Democrat seat, and that's why it's stripy like that, which means they are +1 in the flipping, which means now the Democrats need to flip 2 Democratic seats. And as you can see, there are only 4 states. The dark gray are the ones we're still talking about. There are only 4 states left. And Republicans need to win 3 out of the 4. The Democrats need to win 2 out of the 4 to keep their majority. Yes, George. Sorry, sir.
I was just gonna quickly add. So the Nevada and Arizona are the incumbent Democrats. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Wisconsin and Georgia on the other side of the incumbent Republicans.
No, I actually think Georgia is a Republican. Let's have a look. We can see because it says it right here. Yeah, Warnock is the incumbent.
Okay, right.
And Walker. So there are 3 at the moment. There are 3 of those leftover states that are incumbent Democrats. Right, 3 of them. Yeah. And the Republicans need to win the state that's already theirs, which is Wisconsin, because Johnson is the incumbent, and this is live as we do it, and it's the middle of the night in America, remember, so they're not going to get any more results today, but they're 94% of the vote, and it's 50.5 to 49.3 probably means it's going to stay. It would be something pretty dramatic for that one to flip. So they have to win that, which they will, and then they have to flip 2 out of 3 of the Democrat ones. In Nevada at the moment, Nevada is 80% of the vote, and the Democrat down here is behind by 2.7. So the incumbent is behind. So at the moment, that's looking like it could flip to the Republicans, 49.9 to 47.2. Arizona, the incumbent, Kelly, is a Democrat, 52.4. The challenger, Republican, Masters, 45. So it's quite a significant gap, but it is only 2/3 of the way through. One would expect that to be held by the Democrats. So one would expect this one to be held by the Democrats. So basically the Democrats have to either win Nevada or Georgia, and Georgia is a fucking nightmare because Georgia has a special rule in it that it's not just the person with the most votes, because they're at 96%. And the Democrats are in the lead, 49.2 to 48.7, super close, only ahead by 18,000 votes out of nearly 4 million. But I believe they have to get to 50.1% of the vote. And I actually had found a little piece of video that I think explains that. So we'll play this, and then we'll come back and I'll throw it to you guys for it, and then we've got some more stuff. So this is primarily Georgia. And the reason that Georgia is important, right, is that the Democrats to hold power still have to win too. They'll probably win Arizona, so they have to win either Nevada or Georgia, or in theory Wisconsin. But Wisconsin's, so it's probably this, right? This is probably, Arizona is probably Democrat, Wisconsin is likely Republican, and then the Democrats have to win one more of these last two. The Republicans have to win both of them. So that's where we're at. And Georgia is one of the ones that is incumbent Democrat, but it needs to stay that way. Georgia's a bit different, and I will play the little piece here that I think explains a little bit more about Georgia.
Let's turn now to the very latest in Georgia, where NBC News predicts incumbent Governor Brian Kemp has won his re-election bid against Democratic challenger Stacey Abrams. But the critical Senate race between Senators Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker remains too close to call. Joining us now with the very latest is NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber, live from Atlanta. Ellison, what are you watching for this morning at this hour?
Yeah, good morning to both of you. This race has been a nail biter. We were expecting it to be close. It is still too close to call. NBC News has not made a projection here, but one of Georgia's top election officials is saying they do believe this is going to go to a runoff. Gabe Sterling, he tweeted this about an hour ago, quote, "While county officials are still doing the detailed work on counting the votes, we feel it is safe to say there will be a runoff for the U.S. Senate here in Georgia, slated for December 6th. These two candidates, Republican Herschel Walker and incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, they both spoke to supporters earlier this evening, last night, depending on how you look at it. Both of them sort of delivering the same message to supporters, saying, hey, this is going to be a long night, perhaps a long morning, but we feel good. Listen to some of what we've heard.
So the reason that this is important is there's every chance that this runoff in a month's time will decide the Senate. Will decide it. I'm not entirely sure why he looks so sweaty there, but yeah, that's what it is.
Election, that we're going to have received more votes than my opponent. We know that.
Georgia's Secretary of State's office says there are about 33,000 early votes that have not been counted in Columbia County. Donald Trump won that county back in 2020 with 62% of the vote. Walker's campaign, in our conversations with them, they're pointing to that county as a positive sign for their candidate, saying that they think they can still win this. But Warnock's campaign is also telling us they feel really good. A source close to Warnock's campaign told me they always knew it was going to come down to the wire, but securing a runoff in this environment or squeaking an outright win would be big either way. The number to remember in Georgia, we say it a lot, is plus 50. A candidate can't just win here. They have to win with a majority of the vote. And if no candidate crosses the 50% threshold, then the top two candidates head to a December runoff. And again, we're waiting for the final call, but it's looking increasingly likely that this could go on a lot longer for Georgians.
So there you go. So for some reason, the way they've got it set up in Georgia is you have to get 50.1% of the vote, which means the likely scenario is because of Oliver here on 2.1%, there's not going to be enough of a margin of difference to get to that 50.1%, which means it goes to a runoff. Now, before I go on to have a talk about that, it's a bit ridiculous. That's probably why, like places like why STV works so well. You know, I mean, all those people who voted for Oliver, maybe their second choice would be Walker, and then Walker would get 50%, or their second choice would be Warnock. And then, but anyway, so I've got more to show about this, guys. But jump in.
I'm just going to share out my favorite image. Well, a couple of images from this. We've got my favorite, Lauren Boebert, how she started the evening, and how it ended. Not very happy.
Yeah, here we go. Let me just you keep talking about. Let me steal your thing. There you go, because I brought it up as well. Lauren Boebert, 49.1 to 50.9.
There's been some absolutely just shocking candidates that they've had to deal with. She's been one of them. Marjorie Taylor Greene would be the other one that's up there.
Who I think romped in. I think she got 2/3 of the vote from what I saw.
Jesus, really?
Yeah, I think so.
Far out. And I mean, and some of the commentary that I've seen this afternoon of Republicans going, well, this has sent us a message. We can't keep on putting up such crazy candidates. But it hasn't been the case in all of their seats. Like she, as you said, if she's romped home, she's about as crazy as a bag of cats. So some people are happy to vote for that as long as it's their team. And you really have to wonder when they talk about people being disillusioned with the direction of the Republican Party, those results aren't showing that there's not this mass exodus of voters. It's just percentage points.
Yeah, I totally agree with Jerry that this, and it's early days, but just offering my 2 cents that this is. Yeah, definitely not as red wavy as a red wave as we thought. But like the MAGA movement, all that stuff is not is just not just as strong, but is totally still the Republican Party. It's still the sort of vanguard of Republican politics in America, and I don't think this has really indicated anything different. What I think these election results do indicate, it would be specifically the Pennsylvania thing that Fetterman, that a Sanders Democrat, and yes, he has his flaws, foreign policy when it comes to Israel, some other stuff around fracking. That kind of thing. But, we need to build a leftist coalition with, people that maybe do have, maybe are a bit, shit when it comes to Israel or whatever it might be, and convince them otherwise. We need to build a big movement. But that he was maybe one of the people between a Republican Senate and a Democratic Senate is massive, because he's the classic character that is just sort of the Clintonites, that the centrist Democrats, that the Democrats establishment always talk down to or discuss as being the unrealistic candidates, that the voter base, they'll never vote for, they're unelectable sort of thing, and this shows that in such a hard fought election where he had a stroke in July or whenever it was, more recently actually a couple of months ago. That Sanders message of he's hammering home abortion stuff, but adding in abortion with a greater platform of healthcare, of minimum wage, of all these policies that are so popular among Democrats and Republicans and independents and cats and dogs and everyone. hammering those issues home, and it has been successful. And I mean, I love like him and his missus. They look like some characters from like some sort of like Southern Gothic American novel. They're like,
I was going to say they look like they're straight out of Breaking Bad.
yeah. But also like
he's something
and,
like 6'8" or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. He's enormous.
him and his hoodie, like he's the everyman, and he's going to be in the US Senate. Like there's a silver lining in all the bullshit American politics.
Here's one of the big takeaways. Yeah, one of the big takeaways is Trump's coattails didn't work like they thought they would work. And Ron DeSantis in Florida, who smashed it, like got 2/3 of the vote, did it without being on Trump's coattails. And you might find because of this, he may well have just given himself the front running position for the presidential nomination in 2024.
Trump's already making threats at him too.
Yeah, that also shows that Trump knows this. Trump's doing he's got like an announcement next Tuesday where he's going to announce that he's running. One of the reasons he has to announce that shortly is to try and get out of various criminal activity he's been accused of, like appearing in front of Congress and that kind of stuff. But the point being, most people who tried to ride Trump's coattails weren't successful. So therefore, it's a black eye for Trump. Whereas DeSantis rejected it and did his own thing and smashed it. He has got every opportunity now to say, I am the future. That was the past. It served its time. He would say something like, I respect Mr. Trump for what he did when he did it. But you can see from the midterms, that's not where the voter is now. I am the future. I am the nominee. So I think that's one of the things that DeSantis gets to do from this. And I think that's one of the things we've seen is that it's a little bit like how like on Twitter or on any kind of platform, you hear the delusional 5% at either end more than the 90 in the middle. That delusional 5%, that MAGAverse at the end of the Republicans have been getting so much coverage and making so much noise. That's why that Facebook post that I put up where people are like, what happened? I can't understand it. And it's because big crowds at a rally don't necessarily mean a voting population who want your policy and support you in your lunacy. You know what I'm saying? What that means is that we are in a cult and we like to go to rallies to be in our cult with our other cultists. So I'm really intrigued as to where we go from here with DeSantis, because I also think the presidential thing is sort of a strike while the iron's hot. I was thinking about it this afternoon going, I wonder if he'll let Trump go for it. And I wonder if he'll put himself up for the following one. But that's like 6 years away. And the DeSantis train might have sailed, at that point. And if the iron's hot now, it might be the time to go for it. And he may be able to have a good claim towards why he would be the guy. It's going to be really interesting.
I would say, just circling back to Fetterman, I'd urge people to have a look at the speech that he gave tonight. Basically, like if you're going to take on a state like very blue collar state like Pennsylvania, he ticked all of the boxes. He was definitely man of the people, working man, hit all of those things that have traditionally been Republican things. But they put up, a celebrity doctor up against
who doesn't live there.
Like he doesn't give a single fuck about anybody in that state.
Hmm.
And I just want to circle back so I could use this meme, which I saw, which also made me chuckle. Let's get back to that sort of politics. John Fetterman could have eaten Dr. Oz, and that would have solved us a whole lot of issues.
Yeah. The one thing I meant to say before when I was talking about electability and sort of the Clintonites and moderates or centrists or whatever use of that word, it indicates such like a disconnect. Like you hear that among sort of parliamentary progressives, or like progressives that are really into electoral politics and no other politics at all, right? Politics to them is just completely electoral, because they see the voter base, they see voters as this weird sort of external thing that they have no interaction with. So they don't understand this world where you can build a movement that is extra parliamentarian. It's beyond election night, where the to use the US imperialist phrase, hearts and minds of the voter base are changed, or inspired, or made more conscious of class issues or healthcare, or whatever it might be. And so then that voter base is more inclined to vote for these more leftist candidates, right? There's an interaction that needs to take place, but so often, especially in these American elections that we look at, but this happens here as well.
Oh, it applies everywhere.
This external thing that is untouchable, sort of has these immutable characteristics of who it will and won't vote for.
Yeah, I mean, both sides are more than able to talk to the masses, the working people, and I think both sides are in danger when they forget how many fucking people there are. You know, you to bring it home to us, you can say that National is the party of business. That might fill up their war chest. It's not going to win them an election. It's not going to get them more votes. But talking to people about how their lives are, how hard it is to be a working person in a family, and sort of bend that your way, that'll win you an election. And it's the same when a left-leaning party like Labour forgets those sort of things and maybe gets lost in the weeds about on some things. Let's just say there's some culture war, virtue signaling type stuff. If either side falls into that and forget who they're actually talking to and how much these things they're talking to them about actually matter, like to the vast majority of people, you just get lost in the weeds and you lose people, and that's how you lose elections.
You bring up Willie's comment there, because as much as DeSantis is the future, I also have therefore there it is right there. Murdoch has DeSantis as the future on the front of the New York Post tonight, telling. So there's the front page right there of the New York Post time. And yeah, that's what it is. I also thought what we could do is have a look at some of, and you guys might have some other ones as well, but some of the results you've kind of particularly enjoyed. Lauren Boebert, we've already mentioned Lauren Boebert. How about Carrie Lake? Carrie Lake, who was listed the other day as sort of the most dangerous woman in American politics. I just noticed there was a change right there, so it's actually getting quite a bit closer. So 62% of the votes are in, and Carrie Lake is currently behind by about 2, just over 2%. So it was a lot closer than it was, and that hasn't been called yet. Here's one for you. Lovely people of Alaska, for some reason, decided to run 2 Republican candidates. You can see up top here. Do you recognize that name? S. Palin on 27% of the vote, and Ian Begich on 25% of the vote, allowing M. Pallotta, Democrat, to come through on 47% of the vote.
I love how she's just like an auto-ran now. She was like the figure in conservative politics.
But do you think that was a conversation of like they got these 2 candidates together and says, hey, look, one of you has got to step aside if we've got any chance of winning this? And I can just imagine Palin going, well, it's not me. I'm not stepping aside.
Because as you rightfully say, look, 25 plus 27 is 52 versus 47. I think the last thing I want to wrap up with this as well as a part of this conversation, because look, I think it's highly likely, right, that the GOP will win 2 of the 3 of these states here, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, and the Democrats will win 1, and that will put it at 50 to the Republicans and 49 to the Democrats. So therefore, this runoff here between Warnock and Walker will determine the Senate in the first week of December. And I wanted to make really clear to people and show people very clearly who Warnock is and who Walker is. So I've got some video for you here about a couple of clips from this is Raphael Warnock debating Herschel Walker. The first clip is where Herschel Walker pretends to be a police officer. So, like when you go to as an honor, sometimes you'll be given something. He was given like a police badge by a police group to say thanks for the work you're doing. It's not a real one. And since he's been given that, he's been claiming to be a real police officer. And during the debate, he pulled it out. Now, the reason I wanted to show these is because this is the man that the Republicans will have to back for the sake of getting control of the Senate. Remember the whole thing with about we don't elect someone to go to the Supreme Court in election year. Then when Trump had someone able to go to the Supreme Court, they just turned it and flipped it. And McConnell said things like, basically said, yeah, well, I've changed the rules because it's our guy. That's almost literally, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. In other words, if they can get power, morality goes out the window, intelligence goes out the window, fairness goes out the window. All they care about is power. This man here is Raphael Warnock. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about his opponent, Herschel Walker. This is the man that they're probably going to have to vote for to then get control of the Senate. That saying, any means to an end, that this is sort of the dictionary definition of it.
You can support police officers, as I've done, through the COPS program, through the Invest to Protect program, while at the same time holding police officers, like all professions, accountable. One thing I have not done, I've never pretended to be a police officer, and I've never threatened a shootout with the police.
Well, and now I have to respond to that.
We are moving on,
I
gentlemen.
have to respond to that. And you know what's so funny? I am work with many police officers, and at the same time,
Mr. Walker, Mr. Walker, excuse me, Mr. Walker, please, out of respect, I need to let you know, Mr. Walker, you are very well aware of the rules tonight.
Yes.
And you have a prop.
Yes.
That is not allowed, sir.
Yes.
I ask you to put that prop away.
Well, it's not a prop. This is real. And he said, I have a problem. I never worked with law enforcement. It is considered a prop, Mr. Walker. Yes.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
You're very well aware of the rules, aren't you?
Well,
aren't you aware of the rules?
He brought up the truth. Let's talk about the truth.
Thank you for putting that prop away. And as a matter of fact, we still have a lot to get to.
So that's the first clip I wanted to play you. The other thing to remember, he's a man who is voting and his position is abortion for no one under any circumstances. And obviously in the last sort of 2 or 3 months, it's come out that there's at least 2, if not 3 women who claim he paid for abortions for them. He is incoherent. He can't speak. He can't put sentences together. He can't defend any positions he's got. And he's just another example of what he's all about when it comes. Think about who you want to run your city or your country or your whatever, and to have this level of intellect be the person that's in charge of your local body politics.
We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which had 2 of my provisions. One, caps the cost of prescription drugs for seniors, so they don't have to choose between buying medicine and buying groceries. And one caps the cost of insulin. He said he would not have voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, and I think he should tell the people of Georgia why he thinks they should have expensive insulin and why the pharmaceutical companies should be able to charge us whatever they like.
Well, first of all, may I respond? I believe in reducing insulin, but at the same time, you got to eat right, because he may not know, and I know many people that's on insulin, and unless you have eating right, insulin is doing you no good. So you have to get food prices down, and you got to get gas down so they can go get insulin, and you continue to pat yourself on the back. But right now, families are starving. Right now, families are hurting, and they're hurting because of the bills and the laws you're passing right now.
Senator Warnock, I'll give you an opportunity for a
rebuttal.
Listen,
I meet people all the time in my church who are trying to manage their diabetes. I've been there when they've gotten the news that they've got to get an amputation. And I think we're hearing from my opponent tonight that it's their fault that prices of insulin are being gouged. I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the fault of these pharmaceutical companies. Insulin's been around 100 years. The patent was sold for $1. They're engaged in price gouging, and too many people in Washington think they work for the pharmaceutical companies. I work for the people of Georgia.
Well, he's in Washington.
Can I finish? I work for the people of Georgia.
Yeah, but you're in Washington.
And that's why I stand up for them every single day.
And you're
That's where you go when you're a senator, bro.
That's where it comes out. Now, just think about that conversation, and just think about who Herschel Walker is, and think about him being your representative in wherever you are in the country or world watching this right now. And that is the level that the Republican voter may have to stoop to vote for an inept, unqualified, former professional athlete who's probably got some pretty significant damage, literal damage to his brain, to get power, any means to an end. If you guys haven't seen that, you're welcome to comment if you want.
Oh, just coming off what you're saying there, Pat, I'll put myself in the theoretical shoes of a Republican voter. I'd be furious. Like, you would hope that your party would put up the best, strongest candidate that you can. And it just seems like there's so many out there that, Dr. Oz would be another one, that they're just going for name recognition. A former professional footballer and a celebrity doctor is just taking the piss. But yeah, if I was standing there with the views that I would have as a Republican, I'd be like, nobody's giving me a fair shake here. Like, is this my party anymore?
Yeah. I mean, the concussion thing, I mean, that's fine. I was talking about Fetterman before. He had a stroke. I think that's fine, right? I don't think that that's really the barrier that's going on here. I saw someone in the chat talking about how, and they would have been talking about Fetterman, they can plead insanity, or I'll just put it up. What does it mean when someone is voted into office that can plead insanity due to brain damage and avoid the charges? The guy, he mixes words up and hears words differently when they're spoken to him. He hasn't gone insane, right? He's not thinking in an unclear way. He just, when you say to him, banana, maybe he hears potato or something like that, right? And he had a stroke. I don't think that that's a barrier to being a senator at all. Just like I don't think having a concussion would be one either.
Well, what would be a barrier, in my opinion, is whether that cognitive decline impaired you to be able to do the job you were doing. I mean, mixing words up, so be it. I'm dyslexic, and I understand what that is on some level, not what he's got. I mix my words up. That's why I sound like such a moron when we're doing the show sometimes. But if your cognitive decline is to a point where you actually can't function mentally, that's different. His stroke, I don't think has affected his cognitive abilities. May have affected his speech, it may have affected his, but my understanding, and I need to do some more research to be absolute, but I don't think it has affected his cognitive ability. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fair. Yeah.
Whereas listening to Herschel Walker, like I've spent a lot of time listening to Herschel Walker. We watch a lot of David Pakman in this show, and he's covered him extensively, and he doesn't know what day it is. Like, honestly, it's different. He doesn't know what day it is. And the other thing about this is, they just jumped out of my head because I read something that came up in front of my eyes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to click that.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Look, I mean, actually, we can put that up if you want, Bradley. I think it's a very fair point. And look, that's what I was going to say, because it probably relates to Biden as well. It's not just about who gets put up, because remember, they go through a series to be voted, and they have primaries. So the voters of that region that are Republicans have actually selected Herschel Walker. So Chewy, rather than being disappointed in the Republican Party, like, how about the voters who then said, yeah, this is our guy. Yeah, this is our guy. We'll put him in. The guy that's cognitively declined in such a serious way, and is a hypocrite, and thinks he's a policeman, and all these other things. And I think Bradley's point is fair, which is one of the reasons I think if if Biden runs again in 2024, Biden loses. Because, and it's not even so much about his cognitive ability today. For me and Biden, it's about when he finishes that term, he'll be fucking 88. I mean, do we really want an 88-year-old who has had some obvious cognitive decline? I've got family members who are in their 80s. They're not as quick and fast and cognitive as they were in their 70s or 60s or 50s or 40s. Do we really want to give someone almost in their 9th decade control of the nuclear arsenal? Of course we don't. So I mean, I've said it before, but I'll say it blatantly and publicly right now. If Biden runs again, doesn't matter who the opposition is, Biden loses. And that's one of the reasons, Bradley, because of his cognitive decline.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, you go, Sherry.
I was just going to say, you know, I said something very similar to that. I think earlier on in our show earlier in the year, he's too old. His life experience is so disconnected by decades from what's actually going on, and I think you're seeing there a figurehead rather than a leader. I think he's a person that gets up behind the podium and says what the party or you know the people around him have decided he should say, almost. Yeah, he's too old. He's just too old.
I mean, politically, he's unfit for office, right? I mean, there's all sorts of things we can talk about before we even get to his mental or cognitive or whatever it is. That stuff is, to me, it's just sort of a funny appendix to the whole situation that he's an American president, and you know, sort of by default, an American president to me should be, you know, the enemy, or is the enemy of the people of the world, right? But it's really kind of where I stand on it. And, you know, his cognitive ability at the end of that is just a sort of funny fucking apocalyptic punchline.
Well, I think it's probably fair to say, George, we don't need to check with you after that comment, but that if any of us were voting in America and we could have picked any of the candidates coming up, none of us would have voted for Biden. Is that fair, Chewy? Like, if you could pick any of the candidates that were putting themselves forward, like even the ones that dropped out, none of us would have voted for Biden as the first choice. I'm pretty confident. I've never asked you guys that, but I know where you guys live. So, you know, as in live, hang on, as in live politically, not, I'm not coming around. You know what I mean? Where you live politically. So I don't think any of us would be Biden supporters. And as I said, you know, I would have loved to have seen Bernie last time around, if for nothing else, sort of the countercedence to Trump to do something completely different, but for good rather than for evil.
But Bernie's a perfect example. I love what Bernie stands for. I loved everything. But the whole time I was going, he's just too damn old.
Yeah.
He's just too, it's that disconnect from what everyday working people have to deal with. I want someone that can check his own emails.
We can say wipe his own ass for a second. I don't know why I thought you were going to say that.
No, you don't have to worry about him slipping over in the shower. Yeah. You know, that sort of thing. And, you know, when you get to the leader of a country and they go, oh, we've got a really young one and it's 40. I think 40 to 50 is what we should be aiming for, not 60, 70. I don't want someone that would rather go off and play bingo.
So, you know? So who? Because there's DeSantis. There you go. So DeSantis is your guy for the right because he fits that brief. Who's the person for the left in America? Does anyone come to mind?
I can't think of anyone. Well, I mean, you can think of people that are in the wings, but I can't think of people that are ready now.
It's a bit like when we're talking about, and I think we've talked about with both of you guys, talked about, you know, Jacinda's going to retire. She's leaving. Who's going to replace her? You look at those benches and you go, there ain't no one. There's no one that's going to be attractive to the city to actually do it. So, yeah. Oh, Nick says Buttigieg. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe, okay. What's his name? Who just ran in Texas?
Beto
O'Rourke is in there.
Beat off O'Rourke.
And the guy from California, Newsom. There's 3. So there you go. Buttigieg.
Are we naming younger politicians? Is that what we're doing?
Well, we're looking. If we say that kind of sweet spot is sort of, I don't know about 40, but say 45 to, let's say 40 to 60, 45 to 55. who would be in there. I mean, because if you think about it, now with Biden, I think about not just how old they are today, but how old will they be in 8 years as well, if they're going to do 2 terms. I mean, when Obama won, I think he was in his late 40s, and he came out looking like a 70-year-old, but I think he was just under 60. You know, I agree. I think there's a nice sweet spot there, and I don't think that age necessarily eliminates you altogether. But it's like saying, you know, I've got the cricket on in the background over here, playing up in the background, which is why I haven't listened to a word anyone's ever said. And there's no age thing that eliminates a professional athlete, but there's a sweet spot for them. And I think that can be the same cognitively, and I think that could be the same, you know, you don't have to be eliminated because you're 60, but surely there is Katie's mentioned AOC, and I think obviously that's what you're thinking about in the wings, you know, maybe in 10, 15 years from now. Yeah. So 10 years from now.
So she's got a long road ahead of her. But that would be certainly someone that I would stick my hand up and go, yep, cool, go for it.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's going to be interesting. And look, I even though I want to make this really clear, even though the thumbnail kind of talks about, you know, it hasn't been a good night for the Republicans, they may still win. But I mean, they probably. I mean, I've got Congress here, but it's such a shit show trying to fucking work out what this all means, because there's so many places. Like, for example, the Republicans needed to pick up 5, I think, and they've picked up 9, and the Democrats have picked up 3. So I guess that's +6 to the Republicans. I was looking at ABC News all through the day because they had a good YouTube free feed, and they basically had them at like 219, 217, and even that. It was razor thin, but it was a win to the Republicans projected, and even that was like they were supposed to win by 30 or 40. I'm going to call them districts, and they might win by less than 5. So, but the thing is, it's a bit like, you know, it's a bit like your sports ball, Chewy. If you win by 1 point or win by 100 points, you still get the trophy. You still win. You know,
I think with all the chatter going into this about the red wave, you know, famously Michael Moore doesn't get things wrong very often. I think that's the big loss, that they expected to romp home, to absolutely crush this. All their news media was saying it. The red wave was on everybody's lips, and it hasn't happened. And as someone in the chat earlier said, you know, it goes to show you can't put too much faith in polls. I think, yeah, polls are an indicator, but there's only one poll that matters, and that's voting day. The other thing I wanted to mention here,
the stripper poll,
is the lengths that Americans have to go to vote.
Yeah,
like I saw things about people standing in line on a work day for 2.5 hours to try and get their votes counted, or they had to drive, you know, 10, 15, 20 kilometers to go to a different county to vote. It's remarkable how broken their system is. And
yeah,
so when we get results, it's like, well, you're not getting all the voters. You're not getting everyone. You're getting the people that could afford to take a day off, that had gas in their car to go.
No, hang on. It's got to be really clear for people. There is a law, there's legislation that you have to get time off to vote on voting day. So even if it's a work day, they have to give them time off. You're not allowed to not. So that's an important part. Now they may have to do it unpaid. So it's like a day off.
There's still the potential for coercion there as well. You know,
of course.
Not every employer is going to, you know, follow the laws. But yeah, it's just remarkable that their system has so many flaws baked into it at this point.
There you go. It pretty much is it there. You can get time off to vote, or I'll let it load up anyway. Look at it later on.
I mean, it says there, here are the states where you can get time off to vote. That means that some of them don't.
They give you paid time off. It's the US states where you get paid time off. That was a state by state guide where you're looking guaranteed paid time off for voting, and where you won't get paid time off. I'm not going to look at that because I've got a thing to go on. But maybe my caveat should be, I know that certainly is the case for the presidential election. Maybe it's different for the. I keep calling it local body, but the state elections, you know. Oh, look, it's going to be interesting, and so I just want to put out there, even though, you know, it's the opposition to the White House is supposed to romp home in the midterms. So if the Republicans sneak home, on one level, that's a huge victory to the Democrats, but the Democrats are still the losers, because no matter what if they win the Senate 51-49, and if they're going to win Congress, even if it's by 5 districts or less, then it's a lame duck president for the next 2 years who can't get anything done. So even though there is a lot of talk going around going, well, this has been a pretty good night for the Democrats, there's a better than average chance, a 50-50 chance that they may still lose the House and the Senate, although that's still to work its way out altogether, and hopefully the Democrats will pick up Arizona, and then they just have to win one more. So of the 4 that are left, the Republicans have to win 3, and the Democrats have to win 2. So if they win Arizona, which at the moment there's 2/3 of the vote through, and Democrats are up by 7 or 111,000 votes, then there's only one they have to win, which will probably end up being a runoff in Georgia. Now, that'll be really interesting to see. Imagine the money that's going to go into Georgia over the next month. Imagine getting people out to vote then. Can you show me the House race? Sure, I'm here to please. Although these numbers aren't, I don't know how updated they are. That's what it is at the moment. So Republicans have picked up 9, Democrats have picked up 3. I guess that means it's +6. The Republicans, I think they needed only 5 to get control. They needed only 5, but they were expecting 25. So there.
Do you know what it feels like as a New Zealander to look at these? It really does. Just whenever we end up talking about American politics, such a close race on just everyone gets a puppy or diarrhea forever.
We have coming on the show tomorrow night Nomiki Konst. Nomiki Konst is a part of the Sam Cedars group. She also was running for Congress this year, and she dropped out. Withdrew is probably a better word. She withdrew because there was a couple of candidates from the left, and she wanted to put her support behind one of the other ones. And she runs her own sort of commentary channel on YouTube as well. So Nomiki is going to be joining me tomorrow during the day. It'll be a pre-recorded conversation, but hopefully we'll know more by then. And we will be playing her out tomorrow night after 10 o'clock as well. So tune in for her. And if there's nothing else, gentlemen, I think we are done, and we are off out of here like a bald man. And that's us. How's the house going, Joey? How's the building? How's the bathroom and stuff? We got an update. The people want to know.
We are waiting now for a jib stopper.
Yeah.
So and picking out vinyl for the floors. So hopefully we'll have a shower sometime in the next week and a half.
I thought we could smell something funny from here, but it is what it is.
I can't smell anything because of all the sealant that they've used in the walls.
But that's also part of the benefits of COVID, isn't it? You lose your smell for 6 weeks or something.
No, I didn't lose my sense of smell and taste, thank God.
Yeah, that'd be weird, horrible. All right, team. Thanks for joining us tonight, team. We will see you tomorrow night for 10 p.m. for another edition. We'll be talking midterms again. Nomiki Konst will be our guest for tomorrow night, assuming the last time we've had guests on, it's bailed. Not saying that's ever happened with Nomiki, but hopefully I'm teasing it. So that means it's not. There's a rule in radio that if you tease something too much, it never happens. It's like Murphy's Law. So that means we probably won't be talking to Nomiki tomorrow night, but that's the plan at the moment. And we'll catch up tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition. Thank you very much, everybody. So good to be with you. And stay safe through the day. And we'll see you from tomorrow.